Elena, welcome to the podcast. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, for people listening, Elena just won a national championship in the Women's Soccer College Cup. She works with UNC Soccer for sport performance, sports science, and is doing such amazing work, really specializing in the female athlete and load management and influences on performance. And I really want to ask her about how she's working with the team, how she prepared them for the NCAA tournament. But before we get into that, how have you been feeling these past few weeks? Pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, it can't get better than this, right? It's been amazing just to see the athletes so happy, celebrating. Kind of like it's really hard to end the season and just like everyone leaves and then you're like all alone. But it's nice when you have a championship and everyone's happy, excited to come back. So it's been great this past couple of weeks. It's been a
Totally.
long but good ride for sure.
Yeah. And what a great story because I feel at the beginning of the season, I mean, Anson obviously stepped down and then there was the massive exodus from a bunch of players and there were all these hit pieces written in the media and they're like, well, what's UNC going to do now? And here you are winning a national championship and proving
We're gonna
everyone
go ahead
wrong.
and win it all.
Yeah, so amazing. And sports science and performance directly influences the girls and if games are won or lost. So maybe just briefly gives a background on your career path and just the work you're doing now.
Well, I mean, I've been playing soccer my whole life, played in college, and I was also studying medicine at the moment when I was playing soccer in college. And I wanted to do something with sports. I wanted to do sports medicine or something like that. But of course, it's hard to manage playing and being in med school. It was just too hard for me, so I decided to switch to biology with a focus in physiology, hoping that that would get me to kind of like just working with athletes. Honestly, there weren't many opportunities in Mexico with sports teams, so I was looking for to come to the States and maybe get my master's here in something related to exercise physiology. But I actually started out as an intern at Stanford. I did a 6 month internship there, where I worked mainly with baseball and women's soccer, and then I assisted with a bunch of different sports. Women's gymnastics, men's volleyball, fencing. It was a great experience, and that's where I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I just want to be involved with sports as much as I can, but I always had in mind that I wanted to work specifically with soccer and women's soccer. So at the end of that internship, they had us apply. We had to apply as part of one of our assignments to either a job or the next positions that we wanted to do. So I applied to this GA at UNC, and it was like the perfect position. I felt like it was made for me because it was a strength and conditioning, and then you would get your master's in exercise physiology. And I would be working with Dr. Smith Ryan, who is doing a lot of really good research on just female health and female athletes. And there's a really great PhD student here too, Sam Moore, who is also doing a lot of work with female athletes. So I was like, this is the perfect opportunity for me to go be with the best team in women's soccer, collegiate women's soccer history, and also get the experience that I want to get. So I applied and I got it. And then, so the first year I actually started out as a strength and conditioning coach. I was the main coach for fencing, and I was assisting with other sports. One of them was women's soccer, and I just gave everything I had to to the team, and they ended up buying me out of the strength and conditioning GA. So this year I'm just soccer and basically just doing sports science and performance coaching. I work really close with the strength and conditioning coach for the team, with athletic trainers. I'm doing a little bit of research too. So my thesis is with the team. So kind of like putting it all together in one place.
Awesome. Yeah, that does sound like your dream job and
Yeah.
definitely the perfect fit. And I love seeing former women's players get into performance or sport medicine or strength and conditioning because they've been there, they've been in it themselves, and they can really relate to the players and understand what they're going through from just a scheduling and loading perspective. Now, I know you mentioned a lot of the female athlete research that you're doing with your mentor now, and what are some female athlete specific needs that you are seeing with the women that you're working with?
Yeah, so we focus a lot in nutrition and body composition. So one of the things that we've noticed the most is just lean mass. There is no normative data. We don't know exactly, I don't know, for soccer players what the number should be in terms of lean mass. But we've noticed that the more, of course, the better. And there, we want to do a lot of research with how that protects athletes from injury. Also, bone mineral density is appears to be a good marker of just female health. It is related to, of course, hormones, estrogen in particular, and for different athletes, actually, for different sports, it might be different, and they might have different needs. Let's say in gymnastics, you tend to see numbers a little bit different in bone mineral density and even body fat percentage than in other players or other sports. Sorry. So I would say it's tailored to the sport, kind of like the trends of the sport, and then just creating some normative values um, to work on. But if we don't have data, then it's hard to say what is good, what is bad, how to get there. So that's what we're trying to do. Just basically first get all the data that we can, then analyze the data, and then come up with some good strategies to optimize health.
That is super interesting, and I'm excited to see more of that research because every girl on your team just has a different height, different build in their body structure.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't make much sense to say, well, this is an ideal fat percentage for everyone all around. So it
Yeah.
it, it will be unique. But I like what you said there that we kind of do know that adding on more muscle mass is better for female athletes. So can you maybe get into why? And then also the bone mineral density, I think we should touch on that as well.
Yeah, of course. Well, just overall, muscle is the tissue that we use for movement overall, right? And it's not always the more the better. It depends on the sport. It depends really on what you're trying to accomplish. But everything in your body is going to be protected by muscle. And the better the muscle quality, the better you can use your muscles. So when we talk about muscle quality, we talk about the active tissue and not just like the connective tissue or even fat that is in between the fibers. So an athlete is going to be a lot more efficient with better muscle quality and just overall lean mass, and that will protect from other injuries. So let's say a soccer player that in talking individually, so not comparing athlete to athlete, but just within the same athlete. If they're trying to perform a specific movement, let's say an acceleration, if they are trying to repeat that movement over and over again with a specific muscle mass compared to if they had more muscle mass, then that load is distributed and you have more tissue to actually complete the load.
Mhm.
So you're not overusing, you have more to work with. What was your question about bone mineral density?
Yeah, I
Sorry.
think that's one a lot of girls don't hear a lot of is why bone mineral density is important. So maybe get into that as well.
Most people don't realize that bone also grows and it also breaks, right? So, the more impact you have, let's say a runner that is impacting the ground a lot, there will be a lot of bone regeneration. So the shock is creating like micro tears in the bone, and it follows like the same kind of like regeneration process, or in the big scheme of things, where it breaks a little bit, so the body starts making up for it. So that is a healthy bone. So when you're not eating or fueling enough, or when you're overtraining, that pounding breaks the bone without creating more, and that's where the stress fractures can come, and just like bones are a little bit more fragile. So to me, it's a good measure of if an athlete is fueling enough. The more density they have, you can tell that that bone is regenerating.
Mhm. Wow, that's such an important message for all the young girls and parents listening too, because they play very rigorous schedules as well, and a lot of them have dreams to go play in college, and I know a lot want to play at UNC too, and they really need to prepare their bodies for that load and to be able to handle it. Now, I just pulled up some of your sports science stats. You had posted this the other week, and I loved it. I had to reshare it, but this first one here says plus 10% lean mass versus the 2023 season and 78% availability. So, can you discuss all that in detail?
Yeah, of course. So we do DEXA scans at the beginning of the season, and then we do again in the postseason. So right when we end the season. And that is just to know how the lean mass in particular changes across the season of a competitive Division 1 soccer season, right? So what we want to see, some athletes, most athletes are going to lose muscle if they're not fueling correctly through the season, just because they're running so much. And the strength training, of course, is not as much as we would want it to be. There's just not enough time. So what we did, or I was looking at the team right now, how it compared to the team last year. So just to start, we had a 10% increase in lean mass. Of course, we had a very different team. We didn't have all the players, but just to start with a team that has a 10% more lean mass than the team before is always better to have more lean mass, right? And that it was probably due, most likely due, from all the training that we did in the off season, and the players just knowing that they have to fuel. You can do all the training, but if you don't eat enough, then the muscle is not growing, and then you're just overtraining at that point. So it was great to see that 10% increase from the year before. And actually, we started with 78% availability. So from the 27 athletes that we had, I think it was 23 that were available to train fully in the preseason. Maybe they were not training because they were injured. They picked up an injury during summer, or they were coming back from injury. So at the end, my main goal was at the end of the season to have 100% availability. So every single player could be ready to play if needed to. And we did. So at the end of the season, we had 100% availability for the last game of the season, which was amazing. Everyone was healthy. Everyone was happy, ready to go if their name was called. And we increased, it was a crazy stat. I had to share it because we increased lean mass from the beginning of the season to the end of the season by 13%, if
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
don't remember wrong. So, and for our starter players who ran a lot, we this year we had like at least 8 players that played 90-minute games, and 70% of our starters increased lean mass. So not even maintained, but increased, which is absolutely amazing with the amount of running that they were doing.
Mhm. You know, it really showed in the final game. I watched it, and I mean, I think there obviously was some energy after Olivia scored that epic free kick, but you just saw in the second half, your girls were just plowing. Like they didn't stop. They didn't run out of gas. And I think it's really important to remind everyone listening that that body composition and that fueling, that's so important to sustain that energy, not just through a game, but through the length of a season like this.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, it was all of them. Just like the fact I told them every single day, like they were so professional throughout the season. and it just shows. And sometimes, like, honestly, if we lost the final, like, thank God we didn't, but if we had lost it, I feel like we would have walked like out with a really positive energy because we knew that throughout the whole season we gave it all. They did every single thing that they had to do. And sometimes in sports it's just luck, right? Like you have an amazing free kick, which I mean that's not luck. She's been practicing that exact kick, free kick for the last couple of months, but sometimes it's either good luck or bad luck. And but if you know that you're doing all the little things throughout, then you really don't regret anything.
Mhm. No, I want to come back to what you said about just the importance of fueling because I work with a lot of teenage female athletes on a daily basis. A lot of them listen to the show as well as their parents, and it's important to tell them that yes, you can do the strength training. That's half the battle. But if you're not putting those nutrients and calories back into your body, you won't get that much out of those sessions and you're not going to really get that much stronger or grow your muscles and develop that robust body composition that we want. So maybe share some strategies you did or the girls did to make sure they were fueled and not afraid of doing so and putting more calories back into their body to perform.
Is it's such a big thing, and even in college, like body image is always going to be one of the most important things for athletes, where they're worried about increasing weight and then, oh, I'm going to look this or that way, or I'm not going to be as fast as I used to. But honestly, when you're playing at this level, you just it's a requirement. There's no option of not doing it. We are lucky to have a great dietitian working with the team that gives us like very like solid strategies. So I think one of the main things that we had this year was training table is just a free resource that the athletes have. They can go and eat whatever they want. There are like sandwich station and pasta station, and just like a buffet for them to pick whatever they want in the middle of the day. I think that that's great. But more specifically, what we do with them is we always have snacks ready in the locker room that they can use right in between, school and practice, that they can just grab and go. And we always have at the end of practice, we give them like a Fairlight protein shake that they know they have to drink right after practice. And it's just standard. Like we end practice, they go grab their protein shake while we are stretching, they're drinking it, and then they go home and have like a proper dinner. And it's funny, like depending on how, like, on top of that, like that would be, I would say, the basic, right? Like you fuel well throughout the day, you fuel before, you sometimes during and after practice, but sometimes you need a little bit more. Let's say if you're injured and there's like an increase in protein synthesis, so you might need a little bit extra protein, let's say. Or if we've talked about this a lot, but if you're in the luteal phase of your menstrual cycle, now the hormones are, the pro-inflammatory hormones are elevated. So you have a little bit more metabolism going on, more muscle degradation. So maybe you want to increase your protein source as well. So it is honestly just a conversation with the athletes. They tell me, "Oh my God, I'm feeling terrible." I ask them, "Oh, are you about to get your period?" "Yes, probably in the next couple of weeks." "Okay, why don't you have a glass of milk before we're going to bed tonight?" And
Mhm.
it's like a simple change, but it creates now this awareness of, okay, maybe if I'm feeling not so great, maybe I can increase this or that and I will feel better. And most of the times they do. Sport is about having fun, and you don't have to be dreading every practice. If you're dreading it, maybe you're doing something wrong and your body's not in the right place.
Mhm. I love that, and I think just coming back to just all the food and snacks you had available, just really setting that environment up for fueling success.
Mhm.
And I think for the parents listening, they're like, well, we don't have a sports science or nutrition staff. And I'm like, well, parents, you are that staff.
Yeah,
So you put the snacks in the soccer bag for the tournament. You get the breakfast ready on the table, even though it's 6 a.m. before school. It's the most important meal of the day for a
yeah,
teenage girl. So really kind of model after UNC women's soccer that the food has to be in front of you. Otherwise, you're not going to do it. You'll forget
yeah.
about it. It's easy to forget.
Exactly. And I mean, and this happens all the time, even here too. They wake up late and now they're running to class and now they're running to treatment and then they have practice and then, oh my God, I haven't eaten today. So now they know that that is not acceptable. Like if they're doing that, they are not benefiting the team and they're actually doing damage to the team. So, and sometimes I mean, I get it. Sometimes they would even call me in the morning. Oh my God, Elena, I didn't have time to eat this morning. I'm gonna walk by your office. Do you have anything you can grab for me? And so I would go to the locker room, grab something for them, like just give them so they can eat it on the go. It is all about communication, and making sure we're doing the things.
Yeah, I love that, and I like the details with the menstrual cycle. I think a lot of girls think that a lot of these, like, negative symptoms are just something that you always have to deal with, but there are actually strategies to mitigate them or maybe even reduce them
Yeah.
altogether, and I like that adding the protein to really increase that muscle building and recovery during certain times of the month. I do want to segue to strength training again because I saw on I think it was the UNC women's soccer or sport performance page, these girls are doing weighted chin ups. And I'm not just talking like the taller and like stronger girls, like I'm talking everyone, like all body types. You see like the 10-pound, the 25-pound plate attached to the belt, and these girls are cranking them out, and it looks awesome from the outside, but I know there's some people that are like, "Ugh, why do you need that for soccer?" Or why does any team sport female athlete need that? So, maybe discuss the reasoning behind the weighted chin-ups.
Yeah, of course. No, they love to put some weight on those chin ups. I remember when I first got here, they didn't like lifting heavy, because they had this idea, oh my God, I'm gonna bulk and now I'm gonna be so big and I'm not gonna be fast. Um, but honestly, if it was that easy that people just bulk by adding a bunch of weight, then everyone would be jacked. That's not how it happens. No, but we prioritize health. For me, health comes first, and then once you have like a good base of really good health, then you can try to increase performance. So just having like overall a good overall strength is gonna go a long, long way. We are not about the super heavy back squat, all the way down. As long as we can do basic movements in the best possible way, then you're all set. So pull-ups is one of our main upper body exercises. Of course, when you are training so much, there's so much that you can do with lower body. They get a lot of honestly training sometimes is lower body resistance training just because of how much they cut. So of course we have a lower body emphasis day, but we have an upper body day in between lifts, especially during the spring. And that's where we do all of our overhead presses and our pull-ups and bench press. And it's really, I mean, they're not gonna gain a lot of muscle from doing a weighted pull-up because it's not about hypertrophy, that's purely strength. And the stronger the athlete is, honestly, the better that they're going to be also on the field. So if you think about a situation where a player's back to pressure and they're having to hold a player that's behind them and kind of like honestly engage in kind of like a battle with pushing back and receiving the ball, that is full body strength. That's not only lower body strength, right? So the stronger you are overall, the better athlete that you're going to be, and they're not going to be able to catch up with you.
I like what you said about just kind of taking a step back from the lower body and giving those legs some rest, especially because of all the practices in season and playing at least 2 times a week. Now, are there any other load management strategies you implemented this fall?
I feel like usually sports scientists try to do a lot of practice, and that's not my case. Basically what I do is I let the coach do his thing because he knows what he's doing, and I just look at the loads. Like I just the first year it was just me getting used to training, how that coach sets up practice, what are the main um, metrics that increase when they have a hard day or decrease when they don't. And now that I know pretty much like what is a high load for our team, what is medium load, what's a load, then now I can kind of like pull, make some little adjustments to practice. And like a good example would be we have a hard training session, but we just had a really hard game, and we had a couple players that played 90 minutes. So maybe if we have a game in the next few days, maybe when those players are getting to our maximal load for that day, I would just pull them out. And that would be a conversation I would have with the coach where, hey, you can keep going. There are some players that maybe didn't get the load this past weekend, so they could use a higher load today. But these other players, I'm going to pull out of practice. And they hated. They hated the players when I pulled them out of practice. But I still had to do it just because we have another game in a couple of days and you might play 90 minutes again. So it wasn't really about you need to do this, this, and this. It was more about, okay, you do what you think is best for the team, and then I'll just manage whoever needs to be managed.
Mhm.
I think that was the main thing. And then the second thing that was also, I think, really important is we had a really structured plan before even the season started of when it's going to be our hard day, when it's going to be our easy day, depending on what type of week we had. So in college, you have games on Thursdays and Sundays most of the times, but there are weeks where you have only one game on a Friday, let's say. So there are weeks where you have a match day -5, and there are weeks when you only have a match day -2.
Right.
So just having that conversation with the coach, hey, on match day -2, we're gonna go hard and we're gonna lift after practice, but then your match day -1 has to be very light. And then for the next week, okay, now we're gonna move the lift to match day -5, because that's the day that's the most like away from the next game. And now we're going to go from that high load kind of like tapering for the game on Friday. So those would be like the main two strategies. I didn't do anything crazy. I just try to keep everything as consistent as possible throughout the season.
And you were successful and ended the season with 0 season-ending injuries, which is amazing,
Yeah,
and
I mean, that's all I could ask for. That
yeah.
was, for me, the highlight of the season.
Yeah, it's such a great accomplishment, and then also, there were some girls in the beginning, like, Olivia had her hamstring thing, but then she ended the season on a high note and played all the minutes and was totally
Yeah.
healthy, which is a huge success as well with those impact players. Now, while I have you here, I do want to ask you about speed because a lot of these girls are so naturally fast, it's insane. But do you do any in-season speed training and just to try and continue to raise their ceiling or at least maintain it? I'm always curious your thoughts on that.
No, we are all about speed.
Yeah,
Uh,
I can tell.
100%. All about speed. Our three forwards are probably like I would love to see numbers from other teams, but I think they're probably the fastest players in the nation. And
Darlene is just amazing.
yeah,
I was a
Maddie.
left winger and she's just awesome. I love watching her play.
Yeah, I know her acceleration is amazing, and
Yeah.
all like Darlene, Fassi, and
Yep.
Thomas, they are so incredibly
Yeah.
fast, and also our backline, honestly. But
Yeah.
what we do, so we wanted to make sure that we had some sprint exposure throughout the week,
Mhm.
and we know that speed is the skill that we lose the fastest. So if we're talking about speed, strength, and endurance, if you stop sprinting, you lose speed in about from like 3 to 5 days if you completely stop. And then strength takes a couple weeks, and then endurance takes a month or so. So we just wanted to make sure that our we didn't have more than 5 days in between sprint exposures. So every single match day -1, we would have them sprint. Sometimes that was twice a week, sometimes that was one time per week. At the beginning of the season, we always did match 35 to 40 yard sprint right after the warm up. And then I would be there with the iPad, making sure that they hit at least 90% of their own max speed. And if they did, then they were done. They could go to the next drill. If they didn't, they would have to do another one just to make sure they get to that 90%. And the reason why we do 90% is that's a good enough exposure. We don't have to sprint to max speed all the time. That's a good enough exposure to sprints, but it's also it has been shown to be preventative of hamstring injuries. So we did it for both, just to maintain and even increase speed, but also to help with hamstring injuries. And a good example is we might have some games where we play a specific formation where we are not sprinting a lot. We're not using our wingers maybe that much, or we have a good possession in the midfield, so our back line is not sprinting that much. So maybe we had games where not a single player had sprint over 90% of their own max speed. So that's why we always did it on match day -1, because if we waited for the game, we might not have that exposure. And then as the season continued, of course, loads start to accumulate, but we continued sprinting, but now it was only based on my numbers. So if they had 4 or more days without sprinting, they would just go and sprint that day right after warm up.
I love that. I think just microdosing that sprinting is really powerful. And again, for everyone listening, if you want your daughter to be fast, she has to have consistent sprint exposure. I know
Yeah.
a lot of female athletes will fall off. They might do a speed program for a couple of months and then they just take 3 months off. And it's like, well, you're really going to lose that fast. And it's interesting. You said 5 days of not doing sprint exposure. It starts to
3 to 5 days. Yeah.
wow, yeah, that's really crazy. So, and I think the 90% is great. It's enough to get a good stimulus, but not do any harm. And
Exactly.
the girls are still ready for practice and ready for a game.
Exactly. So like, and I mean, I had the GPS, so it was easy for me to know how fast they were sprinting or running. But if you don't have, of course, a GPS, but you have someone that can time you, then you can maybe do you can do 3 reps, I would say, just to make sure one of the three is going to be at least 90%. But you can go with the 90% with your best ever sprint and then just go based off of that. Like, you don't need all the technology if you don't have it.
Yeah. I love that. That's a great point. Now, just to kind of wrap this up, this has been awesome. It's just like so cool hearing from you. What do you have ahead for female athlete research and just your work?
Oh, that's a loaded question. A lot. So right now I am working on my thesis. I'm gonna finish next semester, hopefully. And I'm looking at both physical and technical performance. And I mean, I have a bunch of research questions, but the main ones are how does physical performance affects technical performance on match day, and if there are any correlations there. But I am also looking at menstrual cycle phase and if there is any difference between being in your follicular versus luteal phase and your technical performance on match day. In the future, I mean, now I'm for next year, for example, I really want to focus on recovery strategies, just because I cannot impact practice as much. I impact a lot more what they do in between practice, and that's all basically recovery. So I want to look at really good, like easy to apply methods for them to be ready for the next either practice or game. I wanted to look like specifically to females because I know there are some things out there, but they haven't considered maybe, and it's not only menstrual cycle phase, but also like where in your life you're at. So if you're a young female, if you are middle aged, if you're older, like how is that going to impact recovery as well? So that's another thing I'm interested in. And honestly, I just want to get as much data as I can. I want to create some like normative data for young females to be like, oh, okay, maybe lean mass is important. How much or what percentage of lean mass I should have? And then from college, I would love to work with a professional league. Okay, what are the numbers that they are hitting? And if I want to develop my athletes, how do I progress them so they get there in the best possible way? So let's say, for example, I mean, we always have years where people want to go pro and they come to me and are like, hey, I think I want to go pro. What do you think? And I'm like, okay, if you go pro, this is what the numbers are saying, right? This is the average max speed. This is how much they run in a game. These are going to be your loads. You're not there yet, so you might want to consider that because you might get there. You play your first game, get injured. Now you're not playing for 1+ years. Who knows? Um, so that's for me really important to get some really good normative data that they can use to actually progress and get to the next stage healthy.
Well, I'm really excited to see some of that research come out. It's just all just very fascinating and it's definitely very needed. So, I will link all your social media handles below so everyone can follow up with you. And who knows, maybe we'll have you back on the podcast once you finish your dissertation and
That would be
you do
amazing.
some
Yeah.
more great things. But I think this is really inspiring for a lot of female athletes if they want to play at this level and maintain and stay healthy, just some of the things they can do to really prepare and be robust. And I do encourage people get a DEXA scan. I mean, there's a lot of places popping up where you can just go in and make an appointment. You don't need a doctor's note or anything. So it's good to get a look inside your internal health and your body comp. So definitely encourage that. And yeah, thank you, Elena. I will see everyone on the next episode.